wanted to get together to talk about the budget, the state of the agency, and get an opportunity to listen to any questions and concerns you have. These are tumultuous times for OSHA. There's some good news that we have with respect to budget. The President's proposed budget contains the largest increase in OSHA's budgets since a proposal in 1992. And I think a budget priority statement is the most tangible indication of commitment to OSHA's mission and to the resources we need to carry out our job. Of course, there are a few details to be worked out on the budget yet, like getting them through the House and the Senate, but I'm working on that. So are a lot of you. And we'll talk more about the budget in a minute. That's the good news side. On the other side, we are faced with some harsh realities at OSHA. There is a new leadership in Congress, and many of them have an extremely anti-regulatory bent. Among those members of Congress that would like to rein OSHA in, there is no source of stories, exaggerated stories, about safety and health, about OSHA, that they can use to try to whip up a frenzy and to attack our budget, our underlying statute, or our ability to carry out our mission. I am deeply worried and concerned about these proposals. I'm worried about their effect on you, the morale of our agency and the circumstances in which we work, the concerns that people have naturally for their futures and for what's going to happen to their hard effort. I'm also extremely concerned about what could happen to working men and women in our country and how they will suffer if there is no OSHA to help protect them, and that if you are unable to carry out your hard work to assist in reducing injuries and illnesses in this country. I'm working as hard as I possibly can, as hard as I know how, to defend our agency and to advance our agenda. And I want to thank all of you who have been working extremely hard in your own way in making this effort. I'm sure that a lot of what's going on in terms of requests, please do this now, do this yesterday, get it right away, make it better, put it in a picture, can seem disconnected and disjointed in terms of how it fits together as a defense of OSHA. And part of the purpose in getting together today is to try to draw some coherence around these efforts. But I have to tell you how much I appreciate the response, the quality and the rapidity of the response we've been getting. Part of the difficulty we have is simply how many things are happening at one time. Hearings in several committees on the same day, completely different sets of agendas to deal with, different types of requests that we have to respond to in the media. I see some heads nodding. It seems like that. It's pretty chaotic on the second floor, and I know the second floor in time has seemed to make a lot of crazy demands on the third floor, and it seems like they've accelerated. But this effort is extraordinarily important. Let me give you two quick illustrations of the type of situation we're in. We've had two standards recently come under attack. The logging standard was the subject of a request to stay the standard entirely, just to stop it. It was supposed to it took effect on February 6th. Now, some of you know that we issued a partial stay this week concerning about 6 provisions of that standard, but it looked initially like the whole thing was going to get stopped. Now, there's some irony here because we pushed that standard high on the agenda because some industry trade associations asked for it. But circumstances change. But we worked hard with members of Congress, Tom Seymour and his group, and others worked to say, all right, we can deal with some particular elements, how fast manufacturers can get chain brakes on saws and that kind of issue, but we do not want to let the basic protections of this standard languish for 6 more months. The average logger in this country has a 36 times greater chance of being killed on the job than the average worker across this country. This is serious work, and we were able to defend the basic integrity of that standard. Same kind of thing happened with the asbestos standard. We knew that would be tough just because of the history of that issue, and there's something like 17 or 18 suits in progress on the asbestos standard. Later came the a number of trade associations, including the National Roofing Contractors, jumped in both in the litigation arena and on the Hill and came up with stories like chewing gum on a roof. And we've been working extremely hard to come to an agreement so that the standard can take effect, to get the compliance directives out, and to explain to the Hill exactly why we've done what we've done. And so far, it's been working, although it takes work every day. The roofing contractors have now shifted their attention to the fall protection standard. And I had a hearing this morning. I kept saying, well, bring up the bubble gum on the roof story so I can talk about the 67% of fatal construction industry falls that befall roofing and roofing workers. So we can try to get this discussion back on things that really matter, not on the apocryphal stories. One of the stories that's coming around is out of a book called The Death of Common Sense. Any of you seen about that book? Anybody read it? It's worth reading. It's actually not a bad treatise, and it's this fairly elegant critique of OSHA, EPA, FDA, government regulation. It's not all bad, I'll say that much. But in there's a story about a brick company. And there's a story about the MSDS for bricks. And this kind of shot at, well, bricks aren't very dangerous now, are they? That story was picked up in a George Will column. It was picked up in the columns of other reporters. It's been mentioned on the Hill. The Rapid Response Team looked into the brick manufacturing company that was mentioned in that book. You know what we found? We found that that company had 6 fatalities. We found that the company had been repeatedly cited for failing to guard its machines, and that 2 of the fatalities were a direct consequence of failing to guard the machines, including a fatality as recently as 1990. That the company complained about the nitpickiness of a respirator standard and how we were getting into whether people could have beards and wear respirators at the same time. Yet their compliance history showed that 5 workers were continuously overexposed to silica. When that brick story comes up again, I'm going to be able to relate that information. And that's what helps flip these stories over from the silliness and the belittling of what we do to the extreme and consequential importance of OSHA's work.